Hi and welcome to my channel. So in this video I'll be doing an unboxing and review of my new iPad 10th generation. So before I get into that, you might be wondering why I got the iPad 10 in the first place. Because there's quite a few other iPads to choose from, so why did I choose the 10th generation iPad instead of the iPad Pro or the iPad Air, for example? So I've already got an iPad. It's the first generation iPad Pro, which came out in around 2015 or 2016, I can't remember. But that's actually the time that I bought it for the first time. So basically I've had my iPad now for around 7 years, and even though it's 7 years old, it still looks quite good. I've looked after it quite well. It's always been in a case, and yeah, it still works quite well, but the problem is it is starting to show signs of age. Well, to be honest, it's been showing signs of age for the past few years, but I've still held on to it just because for what I need, it worked really, really well. I basically use it for entertainment purposes, so things like watching YouTube videos, Netflix, and doing some light design work and stuff like that. And for those kinds of purposes, it's worked really, really well. But like I said, it is showing signs of age just because it's 7 years old now. So yeah, I definitely needed a new iPad. And so a few weeks ago, I started shopping around. I wasn't really sure which type of iPad to go for. I thought since I'm coming from an iPad Pro, I might as well upgrade to the latest iPad Pro. But then once I started doing my research and everything, I just realized that the new iPad Pro was just too powerful. It's got an M2 processor. Yeah, it's just overkill for what I need. Like I said, I mainly use it for entertainment purposes, so I don't really need it to be that powerful. So then I started looking at the iPad Air, the new one that came out in 2022, which has the M1 processor. But you know what, to be honest, even that, still a very, very powerful tablet. It's like a laptop replacement type of laptop. And again, I'm not really looking for that, so I couldn't really justify purchasing that, to be honest. Especially when I started doing my research and I went to the store and I actually started comparing them both side by side. I did this numerous times. Whenever I would go to a shopping mall, for example, I would always go to a store that sold iPads, and usually like the iPad Air and the iPad 10, they'd always be next to each other, so I'd always spend quite a lot of time playing around with them just to see which one I like most. And to be honest, every time I'd played around with both of them side by side, I couldn't really see a noticeable difference. They just both looked and felt exactly the same, especially when you're talking about just general day-to-day tasks like watching Netflix or YouTube or doing some design work or playing some games. For those types of purposes, both the iPad 10 and the new iPad Air just seemed very, very similar. And yeah, I just couldn't really justify spending that extra $150 or $170, whatever it was, extra to get the iPad Air, when I could just get something that's very, very similar for much cheaper. Also, because I'm coming from an older iPad Pro, I still have my Apple Pencil. This is the first gen Apple Pencil. And if I was to get the new iPad Air, for example, this Apple Pencil wouldn't work on it. So I would also need to buy an extra Apple Pencil, the second gen version. And that in itself cost around $130. So we're talking nearly $300 altogether that I would have had to spend if I was to get the iPad Air. And again, after playing around with both of them, I couldn't really justify spending that kind of extra money on something that I didn't really need. But I also started looking at different reviews on the internet, on YouTube, and a lot of the reviewers had a lot of negative things to say about this new iPad 10. I'll get into those later, but it almost put me off buying the iPad 10 actually. All the reviewers were saying, you should actually go for the iPad Air 4th generation, which came out in 2020 instead. That's what all the reviewers were saying. And like I said, it almost put me off getting the iPad 10. But one of the reasons why I ended up choosing it anyway was because, as I've mentioned before, the battery life on these things, any electrical thing, whether it's an iPad or an iPhone or any type of phone or any type of electrical device like a laptop or whatever, the battery life diminishes over time. So if I was to get the iPad Air 4th generation, that came out in 2020, like nearly 4 years ago. So if I was to get a second-hand version of one of those, like the battery life wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be at complete full capacity like it used to be when it was brand new. I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure it will still last a decent amount of time. But when I get an iPad, I usually keep it for a long time. Like I said, my old iPad I've had for 7 years. So I just wanted to get like a brand new iPad with a full capacity battery that's going to last me for many years. So that kind of swayed me to get the iPad 10 instead of the iPad Air 4th generation. Also, they're very, very similar, the iPad Air 4, the iPad Air 4 and the iPad 10, just because they look almost identical. They've got the same size screen, both have 10.9-inch screen, both have the exact same resolution, both have the exact same brightness, like 500 nits. They both have a USB-C. Yeah, they're just both very, very similar. I think one of the drawbacks that I've noticed people say about the iPad 10 is the screen. You know, with the iPad Air, the screen is fully laminated, so the actual LCD panel is completely fused together with the top glass, whereas with the iPad 10, there's a slight gap between the LCD panel and the glass that sits on top of it. There's like a less than a 1mm type of gap. And for some people, and I've noticed a lot of the reviewers saying a lot of negative things. Like they were saying that the screen on the iPad Air was like much superior to the one on the iPad 10. But like I said, when I was playing around with them both side by side, right next to each other in the store, couldn't see a noticeable difference in the screen. They both had really, really nice looking screens. Like I said, they both were as bright as each other. Apparently on the iPad Air there's like an anti-glare coating on it, which the iPad 10 doesn't have. But again, it's not that noticeable, to be honest. And yeah, in the end I ended up choosing the iPad 10, and we'll see if it's a good decision or not. We'll see if I regret it or not. I'm going to try it out for the first week. I'm going to play around with it. And then I'll do a review of it. I've kept my receipt anyway, so if I don't like it at the end of this week, I can always return it, and maybe I'll spend some extra money and get the iPad Air 5 instead, or maybe I'll get the iPad Air 4 from 2020. But we'll see how it goes. I haven't played around with it too much yet, since I've just bought it yesterday, so we'll see how it goes. So for now, let's just get into the quick unboxing. So I bought this iPad from the store called Switch. If you're not familiar with it, it's a store here in Malaysia, which is currently where I am. I'm in a city called Kuala Lumpur, and that's where I bought it. So yeah, I bought it brand new. It's not secondhand or anything, not refurbished. And you can see I actually got the blue version. It's the iPad 10th generation Wi-Fi, and it's 64 gigabytes. And this is something that I really don't like with Apple. I think the minimum should be 128 gigabytes, especially in this day and age. I really don't understand why the lowest one is 64 gigabytes. It's just not enough, really. It should be 128 gigabytes the minimum. But anyway, I can't complain too much because it's still an upgrade from my old iPad, because my old iPad, the memory on this, the storage on this was only 32 gigabytes, and it's lasted me for 7 years. So yeah, 64 gigs is better than 32 gigs. But still, I would have preferred it if it was 128 gigs. So yeah, I don't want to drop this iPad when it pops out. Like I've seen some videos on YouTube where people opening their new iPhones, and then suddenly it just drops and falls onto the floor. Hopefully that won't happen this time. And this is it. So yeah, it comes with this, it looks like a braided cable, which is nice. And it comes with a plug socket as well. And nothing else. As you can see, it's got that nice blue color. The main difference between this and the iPad Air is this iPad just has the word iPad written on it, whereas the iPad Air has the word Air underneath iPad. But other than that, they look exactly the same. Also, this is slightly thicker than the iPad Air. It's around 1mm thicker, or just less than 1mm. And it is actually a little bit noticeable. Like when I was playing around with both of them in the store, I could actually feel that this was slightly thicker. But what this has that the iPad Air doesn't have is the camera right there, which is where it's supposed to be. It's just more convenient for doing Skype calls and everything. So yeah, let's just do like a quick size comparison between this and my old iPad, which is the iPad Pro first generation. Yeah, so they're kind of similar in size, but the screen on this is a lot bigger. This is a 10.9 inch screen, whereas this is only a 9.7 inch screen. So along with this iPad, I also bought this USB to Apple Pencil little adapter, and this is actually necessary. This is one of the big talking points that came about when this iPad was first released, is that because it supports the Apple Pencil first generation and not the second generation, it's hard to actually connect this Apple Pencil to the iPad, because as you can see, the way you connect it is through this old school lightning connector. And with the new iPad, it doesn't come with a lightning port, it comes with a USB-C port. So you can't actually connect it. As you can see, it doesn't fit. So that's why you need this adapter. But for me, I don't think it's a big issue. A lot of people on YouTube, I've noticed, were making a big deal out of it. But personally, I just feel like they're kind of making mountains out of molehills. I don't think it's a big deal at all. You just get this adapter. It only costs like $9. You get a cable with the iPad, so you just connect this to the cable, and then you connect the cable to the iPad and the other end to the Apple Pencil, and that's it. It's not a big deal, for me anyway. The charge on these things lasts quite a long time, so you're not going to be constantly having to connect it together all the time. And yeah, like I said, to me, it's not a big deal at all. It wasn't a deal breaker. So let's get into the prices. I feel like I got a pretty nice deal for it. Like I mentioned before, I'm currently in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I spend quite a lot of time here. So for the past 5 years, I've been living as a digital nomad. So I left England about 5.5 years ago or so. Started my own online business, and I've been doing that ever since. I spend half of the year in Southeast Asia, and I spend the other half of the year in South America, so I travel back and forth each year. So here in Kuala Lumpur, the good thing about it is the prices are much cheaper than they are in the UK for pretty much everything. So I picked this iPad 10 for 1,930 ringgits, which is the equivalent of £327, which is the same as 415 US dollars. So if I was in the US, I'd be paying around $450 for it brand new. But in the UK, check this. In the UK, this iPad 10 costs £499. That's basically 635 US dollars, which is crazy. You know, I think in the UK, we're definitely getting ripped off when it comes to Apple products, because everything is overpriced. Like the new iPhones and the iPads, the MacBooks, they're all overpriced. They all cost more than they do in the US, or pretty much anywhere else, to be honest. But fortunately, like I said, I'm here in Kuala Lumpur, and I was able to pick it up for £330 basically. And this was on a little sale as well. They had like I think it's like 15% off or 10% off sale or something. I was also able to get this little dongle for free with it, because I got like a voucher when I bought this iPad, so that voucher covered the cost of this adapter. But yeah, if I was in the UK, there's no way that I would pay £500 for this. I think it's a mid-range iPad, and although it's very, very good, I'm sure, but £500, there's no way. I think I would only pay like £500 for like the new iPad Air or something like that, but I wouldn't pay £500 for the iPad 10. If you're living in the UK, I would suggest looking on something like eBay or Amazon, just to try and find a good second-hand deal, or maybe from the Apple Store if you can find like a refurbished one for a good price. But yeah, I wouldn't pay more than around £400 for this. I think if you can get this for 400 or under 400 ideally, I think that would be a good price. I think that would be a good deal, but definitely not £500. That's too much. I think that's completely overpriced. But anyway, so what I'm gonna do now is for the next week, I'm gonna play around with this. I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna use it for design work. I'm gonna use it for watching Netflix and YouTube. I'm gonna use it for playing games. I might do some video editing. I'm just gonna put it through its paces just to see what it's like. And like I said, I've kept the receipt for it, so if it doesn't meet my expectations, if it's too slow, or if I don't like the screen or whatever, I could always take it back to the store, and I could always, put some extra money up, and I could always pay extra and get the new iPad Air 5 instead. But we'll see. I'm quite optimistic about this actually. I really like how it looks. I really like the color. The screen is nice and big. And yeah, so we'll see how it goes over the next week. So during the initial setup, there'll be a pop-up option where it asks you if you want to transfer everything from your old iPad to your new iPad. And of course I selected yes. And it just goes through the simple steps. It's just a matter of following on-screen instructions, basically telling you exactly what you need to do, just pressing a couple of buttons. And it's very simple, and it just takes like 10 to 15 minutes tops. And that's all it takes for you to transfer everything from your old iPad to your new iPad. And as you can see right here in the side by side compared to my old iPad, you can see that the new iPad is slightly more reflective than the old one. And that's because this new iPad just does not have that anti-reflection coating on it. So I've got this case for my iPad, and as you can see it's got that magnetic cover, and this is the case that I would actually recommend that you get for any iPad, whether you got the iPad Air, iPad mini, iPad 10th generation, 9th generation, iPad Pro, whichever one you get. You want to try and get the one that has this triangular creases, because a lot of the standard cases only have these two creases going down, and that kind of limits what you can do with the case in terms of how you can stand it up. But with these kind of triangular creases here, it gives you more options. And I've always used it as well for my old iPad as well, like this one here. As you can see, it's pretty much the same but in black. So it opens up like this, and it's very, very sturdy when you place it down. With the other type of case, the one with only the three creases, the surface area that it stands up on is much smaller, so it can be easier to sort of knock it over, for example, whereas this, it's much more sturdy. As you can see, there's no way that you're gonna knock it over. Also, like I like watching films and stuff on YouTube when I'm in bed, and you know how it is in bed, like the surface area isn't very level, so you pretty much need like one of these kind of sturdy cases that you can just plump your iPad down, and it's not going to go anywhere regardless of the surface area that it's sitting on. And it just folds away. It folds away very easily as well, like one-handed, like this, just like that. So we'll just open this now as well. And one of the other reasons why I bought this one in particular, because it's very slim. Some of the other cases that I've seen, like they were a bit too chunky and a bit too thick. This is like a very nice slim one. I would have liked to have got it in black, but they only had this color available, so just had to make do. Also, the back is kind of transparent, so it's going to show off the nice color of the iPad. As you can see, it fits perfectly. And it's got this extra flap that my old case didn't have. So it makes it nice and secure. And as you can see the back color of it because the back is transparent. Yeah, it probably would have been better if I was able to get like a matching color. But like I said, they only had this gray color available, so I'll just have to make do with that. And as you can see, it folds nicely like this. So it's very nice and sturdy. But you can also use it like this. So if you're doing some design work, you can do it like this. Also, you can set it up in portrait mode like this. So as you can see, the case is just very, very versatile. You can set it up in different ways. And yeah, that's why I like it. The price of this was around 145 ringgits, which is the same as around 25 pounds or 35 US dollars. So if you can get yourself a case for around that price or cheaper, I think you'll be getting a good deal.
1 week later.
So guys, it has now been just over a week since I filmed that last segment. So I've been using my new iPad for just over a week now, and overall I would say it's been pretty great, to be honest. I think it's probably met or even exceeded my expectations of it. So as you can see in this video, this was my first time actually using the new iPad to create a drawing. I'm just designing a quick shoe. Just doing a quick shoe illustration using a program called Sketchbook Pro. And to be honest, when I first started using it, straight away I could tell that there's like a slight gap in the screen between the actual LCD panel and the top glass layer. And the reason why I was able to really notice it so quickly like that was because I'm just so used to using the fully laminated display from my old iPad Pro, so that when I made the switch and I'm actually drawing on the new iPad, I could actually see that difference. I could notice that the screen's a little bit different to what I'm used to. However, literally within about a minute, I got completely used to it and I didn't notice it anymore. So the overall drawing experience felt really, really nice, especially with it being on a bigger and brighter screen for sure. So yeah, I did this quick illustration on Sketchbook Pro and then I saved it as a JPEG, and then I just opened it up on another software called Adobe Illustrator. So Adobe Illustrator is what all of us footwear designers and many other designers use, and I use it to create a vectorized flat illustration of a shoe design basically. And this was actually my first time using Adobe Illustrator on the iPad. Not just this new iPad, but just any iPad. I've never used it before. I've only ever used it on a laptop before. So overall it felt very familiar, like the pen tool and everything, but it was a little bit different to what I'm used to, just because they had to change it up a little bit to make it specific for the iPad. But overall, like, the experience on it was great. It was very intuitive, there was no lag. Yeah, just very nice experience of using the Adobe Illustrator on the iPad. Also, over the last week, I've been using it to watch movies, Netflix, YouTube, listen to some music. I downloaded Spotify on it. And yeah, just overall, it's been a really, really good experience. The battery life has been great. That's something that I noticed straight away, because on my old iPad Pro, the battery was just knackered. Because like I mentioned previously, on these electrical products, like, the battery lives just degrade over time. Like on my iPhone, for example, I've had it since 2020, and the battery health on it now is down to around 75%, which is pretty poor. And I've noticed, like, it just doesn't get me through the day enough. I pretty much have to charge it multiple times throughout the day now, so it's pretty much time for an upgrade. But yeah, the battery on this new iPad 10 is great. Gets me more than a day. Like, I've been charging it like once every 2 days. If I was using it a lot, like many hours throughout the day, and using different illustration apps and design apps and watching films on it, doing video editing and all that kind of stuff, I might need to charge it every day. But for my usage, I've been charging it like once every other day, and that's been enough. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of this iPad 10. We'll start off with the cons first and finish up on a positive. One of the cons, I guess, would be the screen, in terms of it's not fully laminated. It's not a laminated display, so there is that little gap that I've mentioned before. And even though for me it wasn't really noticeable, like it's still there, and at certain occasions you can kind of notice it, but mainly it's like when you're looking at it from a certain angle like this, and people don't really use their iPads in that way. If you're just using it normally, I don't think most people will really notice it much. So the second con would be the fact that the screen does not have an anti-glare coating on it like some of the other iPads. When you're using the iPad indoors, it's not noticeable, but if you do want to use it outdoors, I would recommend getting some sort of anti-glare screen protector for it, because like you can actually notice it's more glary than, for example, my old iPad, which did have the anti-glare protection on it. But using it indoors, it's been good. I think the screen is bright enough. It's like 500 nits, and yeah, like I've had a good experience using it indoors. But yeah, if you want to use it outdoors or in like very, very bright environments, I would recommend getting some sort of anti-glare screen protector on it. And another con would be obviously having to use the dongle. Now for me, during the past week, I think I've only had to use it like once, just because the battery on the Apple Pencil lasts for a long time. So yeah, I've not really had to keep connecting it and disconnecting it and all that. So for me, like I said, it's not been a big problem at all. However, I think Apple should have maybe implemented some sort of backwards compatibility, both with the Apple Pencil 1st gen and the 2nd gen, so you can use both pencils with it. I really don't know why they didn't just do that. I don't think it's something that they can't do. I just think they've made a conscious decision specifically not to give backwards compatibility with the both pencils for whatever reason. Maybe they just want people to buy the new iPads, which cost more money, if they want to use the 2nd gen Apple Pencils. And I think that's about it, to be honest, in terms of the cons. So let's talk about some of the pros. I think the pros outweigh the cons for sure. I think overall it's just been a very, very good device. I've enjoyed using it. The battery life lasts a long time, which is great. The screen is nice and big, and it's bright enough for indoor use. And yeah, I've enjoyed using the screen, even though it's not fully laminated and there is that slight gap in between the LCD panel and the glass panel. Even with all that, the drawing experience and the design experience that I've had with it over the past week or so has been really, really positive. I've really enjoyed it. The sound quality through the speakers was good. To be honest though, it's not quite as good as on my old iPad, which had 4 speakers, because this new iPad only has 2 speakers. It's stereo speakers, but still, it only has 2 speakers instead of 4. And the sound quality on my old iPad, it just sounded a little bit richer. I think they both get pretty much as loud as each other, but on my old iPad the sound quality just sounded just that bit more richer because it has those 2 extra speakers. But having said that, still on the iPad 10 the sound quality is good enough for me. Like I've enjoyed listening to music on it and films on it and stuff like that. And for the most part I use my wireless headphones anyway. So one of the other cons would be the overall build quality. I think the design is really nice. It's nice and thin, it's not thick, it's not too heavy. I like the bezels on it. I think they're just the right size, because when I'm holding it with my hands, my fingers aren't touching the actual screen, it's just on the bezel, so I think the bezels are just the right size. As I say, it's just nice and modern looking compared to my old iPad. And the processor as well. The processor is very quick. Everything opens up quickly, there's no lag, there's no nothing, it works perfectly. You can do pretty much anything on it, it's very powerful. I've done some light video editing on it, some like 4K video editing. I've obviously done some design work. I've used Adobe Fresco on it, I've used Adobe Illustrator. What else? I've played some games on it, like the Asphalt 9 game on it. Yeah, just everything that I do on it, it just works really, really well. There's no lag or anything, it just works perfectly for me. So yeah, man, that's been pretty much my review of the iPad 10. At the beginning of the video, I wasn't sure if I was going to keep it or not, but now after having used it for just over a week, I'll definitely be keeping it. I've enjoyed using it, like I've said. I think I'll probably keep it for the next 3 to 4 years, and I think it will last that long as well. I don't think you can really go wrong with this iPad, to be honest. Or even the iPad 9, the 9th generation, the one that came out before this one. Even though the design is a bit older, I think overall it's still a good iPad, and if you're on a smaller budget, you should definitely look into that one as well. That's still available. That's still a really good option, especially for designers, illustrators, etc. You can use all of those programs like Procreate, Illustrator, Adobe Fresco, Sketchbook Pro. You can use all of those on the older iPad too, and it'll still work really well. I think any iPad that came out within the last 3 to 4 years are really, really good. For general day-to-day tasks, I think they'll all work pretty much the same or very, very similar. I think it's only when you need to do like higher intensity type of tasks like video editing, maybe 3D design or like stuff like that, I think only then will you need to start thinking about maybe getting the iPad Air or an iPad Pro. Like if you're looking for a more of a laptop replacement type of tablet, then you should definitely look at something like the iPad Air or the iPad Pro. But if you're just looking for an iPad for general tasks, watching films, playing games, design work, illustration work, stuff like that, I think this iPad, like the iPad 10 or the previous generation iPad, will do the job very, very well. Also, I've played around with the camera on this one, and even the cameras are pretty good, especially the selfie camera. The fact that it's on landscape mode as well is really, really good. I really like how they've positioned it this time. The rear camera as well works pretty well, so I'll just show you these comparisons between my old iPad Pro and this new iPad 10. And you can see like the difference is the camera's just way better. But yeah, that's about it. If you've got any questions, drop them down in the comment section below. I will be doing more footwear design videos, especially now that I've got this iPad, because I'll be doing videos showing you how I design footwear using the iPad. So if you want to watch those types of videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel. So that's about it, and I'll see you next time.